Yes, hello, my name is Ole Olesen. I work as Director of North-North Cooperation in the EDCTP.
Can you just explain a bit more about what you do there?
Yes, sure. The EDCTP is the European Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnership. And what we basically do is that we support clinical trials in sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay, what diseases are you working with at the moment?
At the moment we are working only with the three big diseases, AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis. However, starting from this year actually we will also expand to neglected infectious diseases. So therefore it's very interesting to be here in this event today.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any particular infectious diseases you're going to focus on?
Well, we have a list of the infectious diseases that we address, and it's basically the same that the WHO also address. Plus, we also include diarrheal and respiratory diseases in our remit. So we have quite a broad range of diseases that we cover.
What are the main challenges of having clinical trials in sub-Saharan Africa?
Well, there are many. I mean, one of them is the pure funding for the actual clinical trials, which is clearly a gap simply because there's no private investment. So the challenge, the burden of funding them is really to a large extent on the public sector. So that's one thing. The other part is simply to find sufficient high-quality sites that can actually do the clinical trials in Africa. And I think the third one is to sort of the whole enabling environment around clinical trials. The ethical approval, the regulatory approval, so the whole infrastructure around them is also missing to a large extent in many African countries. So let's say there are a lot of elements that are missing that needs to come together, and the EDCTP, the organization where I'm working, is actually trying to address all of those aspects through different type of funding and through different kind of partnerships.
Do you believe that working with the developing countries who are most affected by the diseases, you can achieve sustainability in research in the future?
I mean, that's certainly what we hope, because our remit is clearly to work in partnership with the developing countries. And actually, out of the trials we've supported so far during the last 10 years, 100 clinical trials, and actually 70% of them are led by African scientists. And if we look at all the funding we distribute, about 1/3 of the funding is actually targeted towards pure capacity building, because we believe that the only way to achieve long-term sustainability for clinical research capacity in Africa is really to work in partnership with African countries and to involve them and to really build genuine collaborations that can sustain it on the long term. This also applies to the countries in sub-Saharan Africa that we think are necessary to involve, because they also need to take up the challenge of supporting their own infrastructures on the long term.
Okay, what do you think the key thing is you'd like to see for the future in terms of research in neglected tropical diseases?
I mean, I would like to see more partnerships, and I would like to see more networks also across diseases, because there's been a lot of silo thinking during the last 10 years. People have either addressed HIV or malaria or sleeping sickness, but I think there's a lot of cross-fertilization that one could imagine. So I think that is one of the things we need to work on.
That's great. Thank you very much for having a chat with us.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.